Hi everyone, welcome to the Quantum Bridge. We have a new guest with us today, which is always exciting. A bit of trouble getting this all going. It's taken us 10 minutes or so. But I think if you believe in that stuff, there's sort of a retrograde or something that's probably affecting all the technology. So, so we've got a lot to cover today. So I'll pass over to you, Casper. Introduce our guest for today, please.
Oh, have we? A lot to cover.
Yeah, I believe so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. We definitely could, but let's not give that sort of pressure to our guests. So before I go on, blather on as usual, Tim, welcome.
Thank you, Casper.
It's nice to
Thanks
have
for
you
inviting
here.
me.
So we're joined by Tim Jenkin. Now, Tim, sort of mutual contacts of ours have brought us together. We're a bit lucky in that we've been able to watch some of your other material before, whereas I doubt you've had a chance to dip too heavily into ours. Yeah, I may be wrong about that. But it would be lovely, Tim, if you wouldn't mind, if you just give a little background to yourself, things like where you're located at the moment, sort of what you're currently up to, and then maybe we can delve back into the mists of time a bit with you as well about historical stuff. But be good just to get an overview for our audience as to sort of where we find Tim today.
Well, today I'm in Cape Town in South Africa. We're just 2 hours ahead of you, so it's not inconvenient. I think today we're going to talk about community exchange or moneyless exchange, alternative modes of exchange, or how to exchange without money. I don't know if you want me to talk about my background. That would take up most of the time, really.
Yeah,
very,
true.
very long story.
True. Obviously, people can find various films cataloguing your history, and certainly many podcasts about that. But yeah, all jokes aside on that, if you could give just a very potted version. I know it's tough. I know you've done so much. I know there's so much territory to cover. But yeah, just some highlights, I suppose, would be nice.
Okay, well, yeah, during the 1970s, well, still in Cape Town, South Africa, I was involved in the underground anti-apartheid struggle with some other people, and we were active for the African National Congress, doing sort of propaganda work. And after 2.5 years, I got arrested, or two of us got arrested, and I was sentenced to 12 years in prison and sent off to Pretoria prison, which was then the apartheid prison for white male political prisoners. And I was there for 18 months, and three of us managed to escape from that prison. We made wooden keys and had to open something like 10 doors. We had more keys than the authorities had, and we simply walked out of it and managed to get out of the country safely. And I ended up in exile in London in 1980, where I was stuck for 12, 13 years, can't remember now. Returned to South Africa end of 91. But those years in London, I continued to work for the ANC. I was involved in various technical projects, and the main one was a thing called Operation Vula. This was the 1980s, but we wanted to introduce an encryption system that people could communicate with the leadership, the activists in the country, to be able to communicate. But of course, there was no internet at that time. So we had to invent our own. We developed this kind of unique system using telephone answering machines, believe it or not. So people would have computers, type up their messages, and record record the messages through a modem onto a tape recorder. And then from that tape recorder, you could go to a safe phone anywhere, public telephone, and play the message down the phone all the way to an answering machine in London. And then in London, where I was based, I reversed the process, converted the tones, the sound back into digital through the modem, and then deciphered the messages. And to pick up a message from South Africa, they would dial another number, which was a bank of answering machines, and the messages would just automatically play to them, which they would record, take back to their base, and then decipher the messages. Sounds very crude, but it worked extremely well. And for the first time in the history of the organization, they had almost real-time communication with the leadership. There's been a documentary, you'll find it on YouTube, about the escape, and then, of course, a film called Escape from Pretoria with Daniel Radcliffe, who played me, basically. And the other one was called Operation Vula. There's also a YouTube video where you can watch that. And then when I got back to South Africa, of course, Nelson Mandela then became president, and I expected great change to take place, but as the years went by, very little changed. And then I came to realize that we'd won the political struggle, but the real struggle was the economic one that still lay in the hands of mega corporations and the wealthy families in South Africa. So then I discovered alternative currencies, became involved in South Africa's first Let's group. I don't know if you know about Let's. It's a sort of alternative.
Yes, I happen to, but for our audience, that would be nice. Yeah, if you touch on that.
Okay, Let's is really just a bunch of people in a community get together and they advertise what they can do for each other, whether those services or whether they make something. And then you just call on those people and they do for you what they've advertised. But instead of paying money, you would simply record the value of what they would have paid. So maybe you were selling me a bicycle and it was £100. Instead of me handing over, or you handing over £100 to me for the bicycle, we would simply record that as you receiving, rather as me receiving the value of £100 and you receiving a bicycle valued at £500. So that would be typed into a spreadsheet, which was simulating a ledger. So on the one side, it's minus 100, the other side, it's plus 100. And so you can trade like this. But it was a very small scale, as you can imagine, because it was all sort of manual. We used paper checks to pay each other, as it were. And yeah, it was an eye opener. You know, I never believed that you could trade like this without using money. Like all of us, we grow up with this idea that money facilitates exchange, and if you're not using money, then you must be bartering or just exchanging, something like that. So that's what Let's is, which led us on to creating our own. Well, I moved from that first Let's group I joined was in Johannesburg. And then after the elections, they posted me down to Cape Town. And I started investigating this thing. And that's when the internet, 94, 95, 6, around there, when the internet became live, I started investigating, creating a Let's system on the internet, because I realized that the manual system would never go very far, because maybe if you have 100 members and the poor administrator has to enter in all these trades by hand, and everything is conducted through the post, you're having to update these directories every month, and it was very slow and cumbersome and led to burnout and mostly these things saw a spike. You'd reach about 100 members and then they would fail. So in the early 2000s, I started to learn how to program the internet, how to connect up databases and so on. And in 2002, we launched our first online Let's, I suppose you would call it. And immediately it took off, because now we had a system where people had almost like having a bank account. You have an account on the system, and you could simply advertise whatever you were offering, whether those were goods and services. So it was a bit like any sort of online advertising platform. You could post photographs of what you were advertising, you would describe it, and you would give it a price in the local national currency.
Yeah.
And the transactions you could just simply enter, just like you do on a normal internet banking account. So it was incredible. The administrator had virtually nothing to do, and the system ran itself. And all the administrator had to do really was organize things like markets and so on and so forth. And this thing became very popular. And within a year, we'd created at least 10 groups in all the major cities around South Africa, although you couldn't trade between them. And then it was heard by Let's groups in New Zealand, where Let's was very popular. There were many, many groups, and especially in Australia. So they all came on board, lock, stock, and barrel, all these groups. And then they requested the ability to be able to trade between them. So that was a bit of a difficult one, because each one of these groups, these Let's groups, was like an economy in itself.
Right.
Earlier, I explained that when you sell something, you, the seller, get credited for the amount that you've advertised or that you're asking for it, and the buyer gets debited. So if you add the two together, plus 100, plus minus 100 comes to 0.
Yeah.
And if you add up all the trades, might be hundreds of them, all of them, excuse me, add up to 0.
Yeah.
It must be like that.
Yeah.
So how do you trade outside of a group? Because they're not a member of your group, you're not a member of their group, and the currency, so to speak, can't leave your group, because then it'll be imbalanced. It won't add up to 0 anymore. So we had to figure out a way around that. How do you trade between groups? And the idea we came up with was to have a virtual member, which is the same as a real live member, but it's a virtual. You just create an account and it doesn't really belong to anyone. It's just virtual. But that same virtual member has an account in the other group as well. In fact, has an account in all groups. So what really happens if I am selling, or say I'm someone in Australia says, can you create a website for me? Then I create the website. And afterwards, when they're happy, I go to the online platform and I enter that transaction, and that credits my account. But it doesn't credit the remote buyer. It credits the virtual buyer or the virtual account in my exchange, in my group. So I'm actually trading internally. So what happens then is the virtual member catches a virtual plane or a ship and travels over to Australia, and then has gotten a virtual account on the other group. So it then sells it on to the ultimate buyer,
Yeah.
for the person who's got the website.
It's quite an
That
elegant
keeps trading
solution.
within the groups.
Yeah. it sort of sounded like this was quite fairly tricky, but actually, when now you've described it like that, it's a simplistic and elegant solution as it should be.
It's absolutely simple, you see, and
yeah.
in fact, if you think about the regular economy, that's probably what happens as well. If you're selling me or something there, you would maybe sell it to an agent or someone
Yeah.
who would then travel to South Africa and then they would sell it to me, you know.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about all kinds of intermediaries and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So virtual member is great because they don't ask for a commission or anything like that.
Yeah. Not yet. No.
No.
Yeah.
Not yet. So it works brilliantly.
Hmm.
So yeah, let me stop there and you can ask questions about money.
Well, it's brought up many for me, and of course, I've got the slight fortune here in that a mutual acquaintance and friend of ours, Mark, and others that actually we know, sort of have given me their take on various aspects here. So rather than jump in with those, I think because that was a very sublime and very nicely tailored overview, which I thank you for, Tim. I'll let Gary. Gary, have you got any thoughts? Because you're not tainted in the same way as me as sort of knowing.
Yeah, this is all new to me and fresh today. Yeah, I suppose. I guess these things sound good, and it's nice that you managed to get something to work like that. But I'm wondering, do you need a sort of a minimum amount of people to buy into the concept to actually get it to work? Is there like a sort of a minimum amount of bodies, or is it just certain? Whether you've got certain trades, you might not have all the trades you need within the groups, kind of thing. I'm wondering about those sort of nuts and bolts type mechanisms.
Yes, well, yes, you would need a basic number of people, but I mean, you would in any so-called economy, even if you were setting up an intentional community out in the sticks somewhere and you were all trading amongst each other, you still need a sort of basic number of people in order to exchange, I don't know, all the goods and services that you can produce in the community. So when these things are small, and people are not offering things that are very useful, that very first Let's group that I joined was not terribly useful for me because people were offering strange things that I didn't really want, like conflict resolution and things like that, sort of remote, weird services, various modalities, types of massage and things. And I just wanted someone to come and put up some shelves and paint the walls, fix my car and stuff like that. And we found the same thing in the beginning. We started off with something like 20 members, and we traded with each other. And then to increase the numbers, we took a computer to a regular market once. And one of the guys was a farmer, and he brought a whole lot of boxes of veggies along. And people said, "Okay, I'll have one of those boxes." And they said, "How much is it?" And the name of our currency is called a talent, and it's equivalent to a rand, South African rand. So we said, whatever the price was, 50 talents. They said, "Excuse me." 50 talents. And then we'd sit them down and explain how it works. And they'd say, "Okay, well, I'll join up and get my vegetables for free, it seems." They would walk off with the vegetables, but now they were members, and we signed up a lot of people like this. And each one spoke to their friends about it and thought it was marvelous. You get stuff and you don't have to give away any money. And then they started offering things, and more people there were, more stuff there is, and they felt, well, I have received something, I need to give it back. And that's the ethos of it. It's like you pay for things, not with money, but with what you can provide. So you're paying. Oh, well, you're paying with what you provide, but it's not bartering. So if you receive something from me, you're not obliged to come and wash my car or mow my lawn. You do something for someone else, which is exactly the way that money works. Your boss pays you for working from 9 to 5 and pays you at the end of the week or the month. But you don't have to then, because he's given you money, you don't have to go and do stuff for him. You spend your money at the supermarket and it goes around and eventually comes back to you. So this works exactly the same way as money, but you don't need money. And especially in this day and age, you ask, why do we still have money? I mean, think about it. You go to a restaurant, you sit down, you eat the meal. At the end of it, you say, I'd like to pay the bill. They bring along the card machine and you tap your card on it. Where's the money? What is your card? Your card is not money. It's just an ID. It's just got your bank account number or your credit card number. And you've got a meal. And the seller, in other words, the restaurant, is in a sense crediting themselves for providing you with a meal and debiting you at the same time. So it's exactly the same mechanism. Your account goes down, theirs goes up by the amount, the meal. So why do you actually need coins? Why do you need currency? Why does it need to be created if it's just numbers going up and down in bank accounts? But the providers of money are not going to let on that you don't need the coins, because that's how the banking system works. It's a money provider. Banks provide money. Everybody knows that. The money doesn't really come from governments anymore. They don't mint gold coins, which they issue into circulation. Banks create the currency. They create the money. You go to the bank and say, I want to buy a house. I need £1 million. Where does the bank get that money from? They don't get it from anywhere. They just credit your account with £1 million and debit theirs with £1 million. So yours, and then you sign the mortgage, and the mortgage is their asset. So you, in a sense, create that money yourself by signing the mortgage agreement. So the money that you bank pretends to lend you is just numbers on computers. They don't really lend anything. But where they make their money is that you have to pay back that £1 million maybe 3 times over during the next 20 or 30 years. So they live off the interest. So that's how the money system works, off interest. So if they just lent you £1 million and you paid them £1 million back, they wouldn't make any. It'd be pointless. So that's how the system works. But, you could do away with the banking part of it, because you don't need the coins. You don't need money. You just need to have a measure of value. What is if you read the economics book, what does it tell you? What do the economics books tell you about money? I've got a list here. It says money is a medium of exchange, store of value, a unit of account, and a unit of value. So if you don't need a medium of exchange, in other words, stuff, coins, or imaginary virtual money, you do need a means of exchange. A means of exchange is just something that facilitates exchange, because as the economics books tell you, that barter doesn't really work. Well, maybe the way they describe it won't work, because the way they describe barter is that you have people walking around the streets. You have a little village, and there's a cobbler who makes shoes, and then there's a tailor who makes shirts and pants. And the two of them are wandering around the streets trying to swap their goods. There's never been such a community ever. You won't find any archaeological evidence. You won't find any anthropological evidence of such a community. It never existed. Of course, people do barter. There's always a time gap between it. I've got apples now in summer, so I'll sell you my apples, and I'll wait for winter. You've got some oranges or whatever. You don't even have to specify anything. You just say, well, I'll do X, Y, and Z for you over a period of time. So that's bartering. And as we don't need money anymore because everything is electronic, we can dispense with the coins. You don't need them anymore. You could just have accounts. So the system I described earlier, the sort of let system, or we don't really call what we have now in the let system anymore. It's a means of exchange. It facilitates exchange. It is a record. It's a record of value transfer, so it's not really a store of value. Because with money, the imaginary thing is that you got some numbers in your account, you're storing the value of what you've provided, and then later on you can withdraw that money from the bank and spend it on hard goods or on a holiday. So the money is stored. So, well, the record is also, I suppose, a store because you recorded that you provided something. And it doesn't mean that you have to receive something immediately. You can wait a year or two, and then you can receive something. And it's also a unit of account because we've given the goods a value and we've recorded that on the computer in the database, and it's a unit of value. We've used the national currency as our unit of value, but we don't have to use that. We could have chosen something else. We just use it because it's convenient. If I say a loaf of bread is, £5, then it's meaningful. But if I say, if one person says it's £5, another says it's £500, then it doesn't work. So you have to establish some kind of value system.
I think we see that now, don't we?
Yes.
Like digital assets and coins.
A moneyless system, of course, there's amazing advantages. So, for example, you don't need a creator. No one creates it. So you don't need a bank. You don't need a central bank. So, as I pointed out, the creator of money is hugely advantaged. So you have this massive banking financial system that runs the world off our hard labor, and they don't really provide anything as such. They do provide a banking service where you can do that, but you can do that with a computer like we do, much simpler way. If you think about let's just look here.
Maybe I could just jump in for a second. There's just a couple of things. Don't worry about that, Tim. I'll jump in for a second if that's okay. I just wanted to mention a couple of things that sprang to mind. I think Gary's had some as well, but just because I'll forget these. So for me, there's the area of sovereignty, adoption, and also inflation. So I'm just going to touch on these three things quickly. I love and most of the people I think tuning into this, including Gary as well, will like the idea of sort of self-empowerment that comes from this. So that's the sovereignty bit that I like about this. The adoption bit is interesting because the more people that you get in these various groups and within the inter-trading groups as well, the more ability you've got to have other people having either the products or the services that you want available in the short term. So you don't have to wait 10 years before somebody, let's say with a house that you wanted, comes on, or whatever that other product might be. But there are certainly bigger items that might otherwise take a long time to sort of manifest within that system. But the other question, just on a purely sort of more financial level, that I just haven't had time to think about enough, is does this get around the whole area of, because one of the problems obviously with the devaluing of, so let's just say in the normal run of things, we've been paid for some work we've done. We got paid 2 years ago. Now we want to buy something that 2 years ago we weren't ready to buy or wasn't ready for us. And we now have to buy it with normal money. We realize that the spending power of our money has been greatly degraded during that time period.
Yes.
Is there anything within this system, and it might be totally obvious, but I just haven't had time to think about it, that negates that bit? Because that is another, as well as the financial institutions and all the machinations of that and all the power that centralization gives them, there is also this other looming spectre in the background of money's being printed and used all the time, and printed and printed, whether we call it currency because it's not really money, because it's not backed by gold or anything any more, whether we call it debt currency, whatever term we give to what actually is sort of there in those numbers now. There's also this thing of where if we do leave money or currency in banks, it's losing value all the time. Does your system get around this, Tim?
Well, there are two types of inflation. Now, the first type is obviously related to the supply of goods and things. So maybe you have 1 year is a drought, and there's all the crops fail and so on. Then obviously farmers are going to ask more for it because there's a shortage of supply, and people would be prepared to pay more for something that's in short supply. But then most of the inflation that we experience is monetary inflation, as you mentioned, printing of money. Now, in this system, or I don't even like to call it a system, but there can't be monetary inflation because there is no money, so there's no quantity of anything. So that's the difference, is that although we call it a currency and we've given it a name, talents, and every group gives it its own name, it's a misnomer because it's not really a currency in the sense that there's a quantity. So wherever you have a quantity of anything, there has to be a creator. And so there's nothing created here. As I said, it always adds up to zero.
Simply a record.
It's really more like a unit of measure, like a kilogram.
Yeah.
Or you can't say there's inflation of kilograms because there's too many kilograms. People have been making kilograms, and there's the suppliers outstrip the supply of things to weigh. Doesn't make sense, or I've run out of kilometers, I can't get to you. No one's creating kilometers or kilograms. It's just a unit of measure.
Yeah.
So what we're measuring is essentially energy, the transfer of energy.
That's right. Yeah.
Transfer or the provision of goods or services or whatever you want to call it. So it's a different thing. So the numbers represent, say, energy or value. Even value is just a concept, and it can mean all kinds of things. So there can't be an inflation of numbers because they don't exist. There can't be monetary inflation. In our system, there is inflation because we've sort of, in a way, using the national currency as our reference.
Yeah, that was, I suppose, why I had that.
So it does inflate in that sense, but we're not obliged to link it. If there's suddenly hyperinflation tomorrow, we can just delink.
Yeah.
We can just say, okay, we'll use the 2024 pound or rand as our reference, and everybody will remember that, and will continue. I mean, value is very complex, or I don't know, maybe it's a simple thing, but we all sort of know intuitively the value of things. Because people say, well, how do you value things in the system? My reply is, well, how do you value things in the regular economy? It's all about supply and stuff. And then, of course, the value keeps going down because the monetary inflation and so on.
Mm.
So that answers that one. And then on the sovereignty thing, of course, it does provide a measure of sovereignty. You could say that, we have a global economy. So you could even say nations have lost their sovereignty because now we're under the control of the global monetary powers, or the World Economic Forum is trying to create a global unified one world government. So there'll be no sovereignty at all. Or you could look at it at a national level. How are nations defined? You could say most nations are actually defined by a geographical area where a certain currency circulates. I mean, Britain is maybe not a good example because it's an island surrounded by sea, but you take any country in the world and you can say what defines it. It's where the currency operates. The borders might have been established through coercion and war and guns and things, but that's almost how you define a country these days, is where its currency is. So then you have national sovereignty, and in this way we keep it community based. We call our system community exchange system. So it's communities or groups of people in a distinct geographical zone or location that agree to trade with each other. So you're sort of bringing them together and creating relationships between those people. And you could say they're creating a little economy, a sort of separate or parallel economy. But do you have an economy where there's no money? Isn't this just people relating to each other, doing things for each other, and providing for their needs and each other's needs? So, if you look up the word economy, say go to Wikipedia or AI bot and say what does economy mean, it will be all about money. That's how the economy works. You've got to have money, and it's exchanging its production, and it's exchange with using money. That's how it's described. But you could say we're creating sovereign entities here that are separate from this money monster that has trapped us all. What we've created so far is very small. We have over 1,000 of the communities and over 100 and something countries, and they're growing at a pace. We've created something like 600 new communities in Ecuador, and it's spreading to other South American countries, Bolivia and Peru. And you could say these are sovereign entities because although we can't provide everything yet, the oil and the planes and all that, we can't provide that. But, who knows when this thing grows, it could, we can fantasize about it replacing the other system, and there's no reason why it can't. But obviously the money powers wouldn't like it. They would see it as an opposition. That's how they make their fortunes, is by selling us money and running this giant scam.
I'm particularly keen to look at this idea of adoption. And as you rightly point out, there are certain powers at play that wouldn't necessarily look too fondly on great and mass adoption. Other than them, is there anything else that, is there any sort of thing built into this or any other aspect of it that makes it hard to scale? My guess is you can just scale this as much as the adoption is. So as much as people want this, it grows to that point. Is there anything else that might prevent the growth and maturity of this further?
No, I don't believe there's any limit to the degree to which it can be scaled. Obviously we don't have great resources. In fact, we started off with one simple little server, and today we've upgraded a bit, but we can't compare ourselves with the global banking system with millions of mega supercomputers all over the world handling millions and millions of transactions at any point in time. So but if the means were there to provide it, there's no reason that it can't scale. Our wish is to keep groups small. Even here in Cape Town, we have one exchange called the Cape Town Talent Exchange. But Cape Town is a city of 4.5 million people, 5 million people, and it's actually too much, and it should be broken down into local communities. The reason for this is that you want to maintain some kind of real connection between people. So people tend to trade within a radius of 5 kilometers of themselves, say. So that's sort of 10 kilometers across. if someone's offering, some eggs and they're 50 kilometers away, you're not going to drive across town in all the traffic to go and pick up some eggs. But if you know that they're close by, you will. The idea is that you keep things small. And also the other reason for that is that, the financial system is essentially too big. So you've got these mega corporations that can do mega things, and you've got massive countries that can do terrible things like start wars and maintain wars, forever wars, because big armaments industries make a lot of money out of wars. They keep it going. I don't need to list all the all the problems the convention.
No. Yeah, we're aligned with that. Tim, just a couple of other things. Gary, you'll want to probably jump in, but because I'm so steeped in the area of decentralization of tech at the moment and sort of blockchain, which crosses quite nicely over into the crypto area, which I don't think we've got time to touch on, because I think that it might not be such a harsh adjunct to what you're doing. But I appreciate the thing of not wanting to touch anything that approaches being a currency or something to sit in the middle and actually mediate. I understand that. So I'm not going to go there. But in terms of sort of decentralization, and I'm not going to reel off a sort of pitch as to the current things I do, other than to say that there is this ability now to not be so reliant on things like supercomputing in that centralized way, and much more accessible ways to distribute information and data out in ways that are let's just call that for now, very interesting and usable for all of us. So it brings back that sovereignty element as well. So that's sort of interesting. But I think more importantly, I think Gary will be sort of resonating with this bit too, is this thing of sort of reinvigorating or creating or strengthening community. And that's a lovely aspect of this, that actually the value is also a value of relationship. So it's also a value of, you could almost go as far as to say a value of love, but it's certainly a higher vibing thing. And a lot of our programs, Tim, which obviously you won't have gone through our whole backlog, but a lot of our programs are about the difference or the move from a sort of more 3D experience to a more 5D experience of sort of the natural giving nature, and not necessarily actually expecting something in return out of that as well. So we've got these sort of parallel types of experience or economy or whatever we want to call them going on sort of and growing on the sidelines. So our view, Gary and mine and many who are on the Quantum Bridge, would be that we're sort of involved in building or sort of de facto building a system that can replace the other one. So rather than this whole thing of revolution and pulling things down, that where we pour our energy is actually where we then create this other way. And this other way, by adoption, automatically and over time negates that system that was given to us and that we sort of adopted because we were almost programmed, as you touched on, to think in terms of money. So I just wondered whether or not, in terms of consciousness as well, if any of these things, because your background is something where this is all born out of a real sense of justice and fairness. And I just get that sense and that solidity, sense of solidity from you as well. Do you feel that there's an undercurrent of a movement or something more here than just going sort of back to basics and having a nice system that the internet has helped facilitate? Or actually, are you more just aligned to, look, we're doing something that just makes sense and there are some nice things that come out of that? Where do you sit as a being in all of this?
Yeah, I think the latter one, it's not an ideology, community exchange is not an ideology. We don't have a Bible that we spread around, like these are the rules and this is the way it's supposed to work. And this explains the universe and all that sort of thing. It started off just being, well, I suppose it is today still just really a set of tools. The computers are really there to assist us. Computer is not the community. You can sign up, you can create a new exchange for your area, for maybe the town that you live in. That's not the community, it's just the tool that you use. The community is people on the ground. And, we've been running this for over 20 years. We started in 2002, so 22 years here in Cape Town. And we have regular markets and so on, live markets where people bring their goods and sell them. And sometimes people with various modalities, massage and stuff, they come there and do things. And the vibe is so different from a conventional market. Most markets you go to, people sort of look at things, and then the seller wants to tell you why it's the best, and he's trying to flog this stuff and just to get your money out of your pocket. And at our markets, there's no money. So what we do is we just have what's called a trading sheet. So you write down your name and your account number, and then you sign it and you describe what you've taken. And often the stallholder is not even in attendance. They just leave all their stuff there. And there's no point in stealing it because you can have it anyway. All you got to do is sign for it,
Mm.
So the vibe is completely different. They're more like a jamboree. Everybody comes to the markets just to meet old friends. It's not about making a profit. And that's the whole ethos of the system. It creates relationships. So exchange is the highest thing. If you read the economics books, exchange is subsumed under money. Money is like the highest order. It's up there with God.
Or instead of, yeah.
Like gravity or energy or matter. Money is just like what are the constants of the universe. And you can't imagine life without it because you have no money, you'll just die. And we proved it's not true. You can survive. But, ours is just a small Mickey Mouse operation, I often say, because compared to the big thing, it's small and you can't buy cars and houses and travel overseas on it, but you can get many things, you can avoid spending those pounds or dollars or whatever. But that doesn't mean it's stuck there and it's just forever going to be a little toy. It needs mass adoption, and then somehow people will realize that the world doesn't need to be the way that it is, because the actual money economy is just when you listen to anyone in business, everybody's trying to outdo their competition, and it's just dirty business, and there's so much corruption going on. And very often when I give talks, people say, well, people are just going to cheat, aren't they? They're just going to take things without giving anything back. And I say, well, how does the monetary economy work? Have you shown me an honest deal anywhere? It's corrupt from top to bottom. So yeah, it doesn't. I mean, you don't, because you can't steal this stuff. There's nothing there to steal. It's all open and transparent. You can see how other people use the system. You can't see what they're buying or what they're selling. Well, you can see what they're selling because they're advertising selling, but you can't see their actual current account. But you can see how many trades they've done and who's in debit and who's in credit. And the object of it is really to keep your balance hovering around zero. So
Yeah. So you're not taking too much nor giving too much. Yeah.
Yeah, the object in the monetary economy is the stars. The richer you are, the better you are, the more power you have, more control you have over other people, and the more that you can buy governments and corporations. People run the world the way you want it to be. Whereas this way, you're putting, as it were, the money power back in the hands of people. There's no one creating the money as such because there isn't any. But if you want to look at it in monetary terms, you could say that people are creating their own money. By providing something, you create credits for yourself. By receiving something, you're creating obligations. So those negative numbers are not debt as such, but they just represent what you owe back to the community. So by providing something, you bring your balance back to zero or beyond or closer to zero. And by providing things, you're giving other people the opportunity of providing things. So what goes around comes around. And that's basically what money does, but you don't need to cheat here. And there's no point in hacking the system, because if you did that and managed to get into the database and up your balance a little bit, then the whole system wouldn't add up to zero anymore, and you'd immediately expose yourself. So you can't cheat like that. You can't cheat by manipulating the system. You can't just credit yourself against someone, because they would get alerted that it's happened, and they can call up a statement of account at any point. So you cut out the evilness, and there's no need for it, because everything is there and available. You pay for it by doing stuff.
Tim, I also
find
get
out
the sense the sort of people involved in this generally, I mean, I'm sure that there can be people who might try to do something,
Yeah,
but actually, if you're drawn to this, it's just not where you're coming from
that's correct.
to treat it in that way, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And it doesn't encourage it. People come in with maybe the idea that, oh, I'm going to get a lot of free stuff here. They soon learn that it's not about that. It's about community. And, we have this past, I don't know, 5, 6 years, we've had an annual get together where people camp out in the country, and everyone sets up a tent, and you're not allowed to bring money with you, and everything is done on the system. And it's such an amazing feeling, people offering things and doing things for each other, and it's just wonderful, it's and people learn that doing stuff for other people is not about making money and to undermine them, or and to just to increase your profitability. It's about your relationships, and the more honest you do things, the more friendly people get, and the more they want to deal with you, and you earn a good reputation. It's, in a sense, a reputation system. If you abuse it and remain at the credit debit limit forever and never do anything, never give anything back, no one will trade with you. As simple as that. They can see it.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in the regular economy, does it?
Yeah.
No, it's more like a relationship economy, and it feels more authentic. It feels like an authentic situation, and maybe I was calling it that. Gary, sorry, I know that you've had things to say. Please ask.
Well, just a few points to bring up, I suppose. The one is that what you mentioned, Casper, that a certain consciousness to want to move into these types of things. I mean, when you look at the title of the channel here, the bridge part is that we see ourselves as being here and we want to get to here, but there's maybe a transitionary process within that as the collective consciousness evolves. So I think I know Casper didn't want to dip too much into the crypto, so I mentioned there are ways at the moment where gold has been fractionalized digitally, and you can go around with a MasterCard and move in the world spending gold in your native currency sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, but it's sort of like, well, how many people are attracted to that? So in essence, we have a way out, and that's also, again, this bridge thing where we're having to say, well, what is it? Well, gold is whatever, I don't know, £2,000 an ounce or something. We're still valuing it against the pound or the rand or whatever. There's still this messy part, if you know what I mean, where we're still having to say, well, what is it worth, and relate it to something that you already know. I'm not sure how long it's going to take to where we can not think about that, or just, like I say, there's still some reference where, even though I might think, well, I'm spending 0 or 1 gram of gold, the shopkeeper is oblivious to that. They think I'm spending whatever, £10 or whatever it is, or more than that. But so there's to allow us to operate freely in the world still, and to, like you say, have access to all goods. There's this kind of bridge element, I think, of consciousness to get us there, and maybe technology is a way. Because, like I said, you can do the same with crypto. You can go around tapping and spending Bitcoin if you want, and the rest of the world is oblivious to that. Like I say, you're paying in pounds or dollars or whatever. You know it's coming off of your crypto balance. So I don't know how you feel about it in that sense. Like we're still talking about of scaling these things up, maybe using technology. There are all these tools here. When we talk
Yeah,
about
this is probably the
a
biggest.
world defining sort of change, yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, how to scale it up,
Mm.
it's not something that appeals to a lot of people. They're just interested in making money and they're focused, and that's all they know.
Yeah.
We're taught from a very early age that life is about making money. You go to school to get a degree so that you can get a good job and earn a lot of money, and send your kids to school so they can get a degree and earn a lot of money, and it goes on and on. And so most people think that's what life's about. Families are split up because people are chasing after money and they need money, and there's no money in their country, so they go to another country where there is money. And all these other things, there's crypto and there's gold and there's infinite number of other schemes, but ultimately they're all redeemable to dollars. It's the global reserve currency or pounds, whatever. That's really what interests people and get into Bitcoin. And even though the original idea of Bitcoin was great, you create sovereign entities or communities and could replace the dollar, the bad dollar, and everybody be able to trade in this thing that's free of the banking system. But as you can see today, it doesn't work like that.
They just use it as an investment, like a new stock market.
Ponzi scheme for
Yeah.
speculation. You come with your dollars, you buy the Bitcoins, you wait a bit, it goes up, and then you sell it and you get your dollars back, and then you can afford something you couldn't afford before, and you've not provided any value to anyone, and everybody's looking for a way to get something without doing anything. And so, we can talk about all kinds of things related to this alternative exchange system. We call it community exchange system, but it's not just one mode of exchange. We try to encourage all kinds of different ways. And if you look at history, it's not just money. Your textbooks would say, before there was money, there was barter, and then there was money, and now everything is money, and the entire universe is measured in money. I've even seen calculations of like what Mars is worth in dollars, and how much the moon can be mined for whatever. And it's all monetized, the entire universe. Every person is monetized, and it doesn't need to be.
But Tim, don't you see that more as symptomatic that all of these systems, what we're moving through, on one level is these external machinations of how we are changing and morphing as a human sort of expression, so to speak. But all of these systems are really a reflection of where we're at. Now, I don't want to take it too much into this territory. It's a territory we would normally go into, but I don't know even how comfortable you are with it or how much this is just an anathema to you. But from my perspective, at least, I can only speak from that anyway, that sort of as we move through, because I'm feeling very much drawn to what you're talking about in terms of CES now, and definitely coming from you, because I'm feeling it as a human being, feeling your sense about it. And that's what's attracting me to it. It's less about what it actually is, and it's more about, I like this guy, and therefore what he's doing and what he's created is now resonating more with me. And I only use that example as a way to show that generally I think that there is a movement towards things that feel like they resonate more with people as they're getting more into things like spirituality, and there's other aspects arising in them where we could just say it's sad, but we're in a world where ultimately it's just about money. We're going to do something different, but we know in a way it's doomed never to be grand scale, because we've got all these amazingly powerful beings out there who have access to fortunes we can't even understand. And as you rightly say, they're already carving up Mars and the moon and the other planets, and probably looking at other solar systems. Or we can say, actually, there is this undercurrent of change that seems to be gathering pace. And in the end, what we'll end up with is a system that is on par or resonates with where we are as a species, as beings. And that actually money wasn't given to us. Money was more of a reflection of where we were at a point in time, and that we're sort of traversing and moving through that. So because that's what this channel is more about, I just throw out that aspect that, yeah, I'm very drawn to what you've talked about, and I find it fascinating and I find it resonates. But I also wonder if there's another stage beyond that where we just automatically have the urge to give and not necessarily look to receive, although we would, because others would have the urge to give. And that actually there is, talking about Gary's bridge analogy as part of our title, it does make sense that maybe there is this more utopian vision there. And I appreciate, as somebody also who's been through this thing of sort of looking for various utopias and really not just looking for them, acting on trying to make those happen, and maybe not seeing them flourish in quite the same way as you might have once thought. Whether or not all this stuff is a bit like, oh, Casper, that makes me feel a bit sick, or you've just come out with, or actually there is something that touches me back in terms of that.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same as you do. I have this grand vision, of course. I don't think, oh, well, it's just a bit of fun. I learned how to program a computer, and the forces we're up against are just too great. We see, I don't know how much longer the current system can go on for. All our predictions have come to not very much, and it just somehow keeps going. But it has to reach a limit sometime. And I don't want to say that what we're trying to promote is just a lifeboat, but it can also be seen as that. If there's, say, a massive collapse somewhere or hyperinflation somewhere, this could, and we've seen many examples throughout history where these alternative currencies have really taken off. And many books have been written about what happened in Austria and Germany prior to, after the Great Recession and the Nazis and so on. A lot of these alternative currency communities started in Germany and Austria, and they were soon shut down by the Nazis and banking system, because they realized it was a threat, and they were so successful. And we've seen, similar things happening in Argentina and various other South American countries where there's been economic collapse or currency collapse, that these alternative currencies suddenly come alive, and every time they're destroyed by the banking system. They just come in and just create havoc. So we've no doubt that similar thing could happen here, but if it's you talked earlier about distributing databases and distributing all the info and blockchain and all this sort of thing. That's the direction we'd very much like to go, because currently our system is very vulnerable. All the different systems we've linked up to a number of other similar systems, and we trade through a kind of centralized thing. I suppose it's equivalent to, like the SWIFT banking system that links all the world's banks. or the individual banks and actually the different banking and financial institutions, we have a similar thing, which sort of keeps track of all the banks and where they are. But if I want to trade with someone else in another system, my system doesn't need to know anything about it. It just operates through this centralized thing. But that's a weak point. So we need to obviously think about decentralizing and blockchaining all this stuff. But that's another thing. That's just a technical problem. But yes, we have grand visions, and it's more about creating community. I think once people realize that exchange is not just a thing to increase increase your wealth at the expense of others. I don't know. It's just you have to experience it really to understand it. I don't know what else I can say. But I'm totally, I mean, it sounds like you guys are totally on board with it, the ethos. And it's the long-term idea is that you can do away with all these mechanisms, that we would have a more gifting economy. But you need stepping stones to reach that point. You know,
Yeah,
we've all
absolutely.
grown
Yeah.
funny thing. So the keeping electronic records in a ledger is similar, but you know, we're not communities where we know our neighbors. We don't trust everyone yet. So when or while we don't trust each other, we need these sort of mechanisms that allow us to change things. We want to feel that if we give something, we will receive something. And you know, gifting today and the environment that we've grown up is just not viable. You give something and then maybe you won't, maybe you'll get something back, but probably you won't. So we encourage all these things. We have, you know, when you advertise an offering, you say, how would you like to use this? Do you want it to be ledger based? In other words, use the currency, or do you want to gift it? Or do you want to barter it? Or do you want to exchange it for something specific? We also encourage what we call time trading, where people do something for each other and they simply record the hours. So like I come and paint your house and I record 20 hours of time. And that's, in a sense, what you owe me. We can still talk, and you don't have to give those hours back immediately. It can be next year or some other time, or we can come to some other arrangement where you give me money or whatever. You know, so many different ways of exchanging, and not just one.
Yeah, lovely.
I think that's the interesting time we're in the world. There's so many options now. You know, we've had other people on talk about, well, yeah, from like Mark and Natalie and things with the food that they do. They do, and then they see it more like they say, providing to the community. They don't really look at it as in customers or business per se. Although there is obviously a trade of money transaction. But I mean, I see it a lot online now. With interesting times where people can create their own digital tokens and things, you know. And sometimes if a person's got a project, they say, okay, well, you know, here's my token, and if you want to invest in what I want to do, these things are starting to become available to us. We'll see how that pans out. I mean, we could have a quantum bridge token, and if someone decides to accept that, then it's just whatever people believe it. I mean, at the end of the day, they believe in the pound, if you like. You could just believe in something else. You know, it's only really
whatever works. You know, you don't really need to keep records. You know, in the money economy, they have this one grand overall number called GDP, and everything is supposed to add and increase that number. But you know, it's pretty meaningless, and often this number just means, I don't know, you can interpret it as how much destruction you've created. You know, if you're just selling weapons and stuff and it's all going onto GDP and I don't know, building roads and polluting the atmosphere, and it's all just money, and GDP growth is good, and every country is saying, oh, we got 2.3 growth this year is not so good, and look at that country, they got 4.5% growth. They're good, and got to grow and create more jobs and more and more and more and more and more.
Yeah.
And need to stop at some point.
Yeah.
Because
Or have
carrying capacity is not infinite.
some kind of transfer where more heart-centered people have the means.
Mm.
Anyway, Cass, we're running out of time again. So
Yeah, I knew we would be. Well, I think we've covered a lot. I mean, there's areas I'd love to delve into, and as I said, this on the digital asset side and on decentralization, there's a whole host of things, but we won't have time, nor should we extract the energy from Tim to do that, because he's been very giving. So I think for this one, Tim, I would say you will always be welcome back on, and thank you very much for joining and painting a picture of sort of what you've, and this is only, I appreciate, an aspect of what you've done, but it's a very important and timely one, I feel. So I'm glad we've centered on that. And thank you for coming on. And as I said, we'll come back to you. And if you'd like to come back and talk about other areas, we'd love to do that. But this was a really good overview. So yeah, thank you for joining, Tim.
All right, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to come back again next time. Perhaps I can give you a demo of how it all works, and you can see all the exchange groups all over the world and how the conversion rates work and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah,
might be interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'd love to, because you sort of touched on it, but this thing of sort of South America and whatever, I'm really interested in those territories. I think that we might hone in on some certain areas as well. So anyway, for another time, Tim.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much. Have a good weekend.
All right.
Take care.
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.